Good morning and welcome to our webinar entitled Aging Without Fear. Today we're going to be going through some exciting research that was conducted by the Retirement Village Residents Association of New South Wales, and the research itself was funded by the New South Wales Government. We've put together some speakers that we're going to ask to talk to the research across the next hour, as well as some questions and discussion we're going to have at the back end of the hour. My name's James Wiltshire. I'm the Executive Director of the DCM Institute. We provide professional development for retirement village managers in and across the country, and we're absolutely privileged to have partnered with the RVRA today to host this webinar and share the findings of the research with you all. Before we begin, I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge the ongoing connection Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have to the land. We recognise their unique and diverse cultures and the significant contributions they make to our country. The structure of today's webinar is that we'll be inviting some speakers from the RVRA, a subject matter expert, and someone from Fair Trading over the next, say, half an hour to 40 minutes. Following this, we will then have a panel discussion where we'll invite some of the speakers back, and we have a representative from a known retirement village operator joining us as well. Throughout the webinar, you'll notice that there is a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. You're more than welcome to use that at any time and ask questions, and I will be triaging them for the conversation at the back end of the webinar. Before we begin, though, we have a video from the New South Wales Office of Fair Trading that's been prepared by Cathy Townsend, who's the director. As I said at the top, the research itself was funded by the New South Wales Government through a grants program that the RVRA was able to capitalise in order to look at psychological elder abuse in retirement villages. So I thought we'd start by just playing this quick video from Cathy Townsend, director.
Hi everybody, my name's Cathy Townsend. I'm a director with New South Wales Fair Trading. I'd like to start by commending the RVRA for its initiative to undertake this survey. I know you've heard a lot lately from the New South Wales Government about its commitment to improve the experience of tenants in New South Wales and people living in defective strata buildings. But it's important to know that we haven't forgotten about retirement village residents. I'm pleased that Fair Trading could contribute through its sponsorship program to allow this very important work to be undertaken by the RVRA. Clearly, a key consideration for anyone choosing to live in a retirement village is about having an improved sense of personal safety, together with support when it's needed, and of course the camaraderie that comes from living with your peers with shared interests. This is the first report of its kind that focuses solely on the experience of retirement village residents. As the RVRA present their findings to you, I'm sure you'll see that there is a role for operators, for government and for residents themselves to prevent psychological harms through elder abuse. I implore you to consider these findings and to consider what role you may have to support and protect yourself and your neighbours. I look forward to continuing the long-standing and productive relationship that Fair Trading and the RVRA have built, and we look forward to working together to improve the lives for people living in retirement villages. Thank you.
Thanks, Cathy. And yes, Levy, the audio came through perfectly, so thank you for checking in with us all. As I said, Cathy was representing Fair Trading there, who were assisted in the financing and the coordination of this project with the Retirement Village Residents Association of New South Wales. I'd now like to introduce those on the call to Craig Bennett. Craig is the president of the Retirement Village Residents Association of New South Wales. But prior to retiring, Craig worked in investment banking. He's held a number of board positions, including company secretarial roles at Bendigo Bank, and he's also a volunteer chaplain in an aged care facility, as well as being a resident in the retirement village himself. I'd now like to invite Craig to welcome everyone to today's webinar.
Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. Thank you, Cathy. Thank you, James. Welcome to this webinar. I would like to start to make a few initial observations before we head into the meat of the subject of psychological elder abuse of residents in retirement villages in New South Wales. First, who are we? Who are the RVRA? We are the only association in New South Wales dedicated to the interests and protection of residents in retirement villages. We advocate and lobby government and industry participants to identify the issues and protect the residents' interests. We inform, support and advise our members, not only our members, but also other residents in retirement villages, other managers, operators. We are a resource for people. We have a chat line or a call line. And over the last 18 months, we have received many calls, many more calls actually, dealing with elder abuse in retirement villages. This was an unheard of subject about 18 months ago, but since COVID, we've been getting quite a regular number each month. And we looked at it and we thought, well, there has been no survey actually targeted solely at residents in retirement village on psychological elder abuse. Financial elder abuse is treated, other areas are treated, but we decided to do this survey. And I think it gives us a snapshot of what is happening in retirement villages and to our members. I hope you find it interesting. This study has had many participants, but I would like to thank two major parties in particular. First, the Department of Fair Trading, who got behind this initiative and actually funded us to be able to enable us to do this survey and to finalise the report. Now, this survey went out to our members and to about 125 villages in New South Wales. That could not have been done without the support of many operators and managers. And I would like to give a big thank you and call out to them. There are many of them, but I'll just name a few: Anglicare, Aveo, Levande, Living Choice, Oak Tree, the Witten Group, and so on and so on. And the managers of villages, individual managers of villages that have helped us. You're going to listen to the report. You're going to listen to Roger say what has come out of it. And it's a bit eye-opening, I admit. But going forward, and as Kathy has said, we need to have a collaborative approach between all stakeholders, whether it's government, residents, operators, managers, so that we can work closely together to help people identify and deal with and mitigate elder abuse in retirement villages, particularly psychological elder abuse. It's a very difficult subject. So I hope the information contained in this webinar is welcome. I hope it's informative, and I hope it is really eye-opening as I found it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Craig, for those warm and kind words. And certainly the RVRA in New South Wales, as well as across the country, does a wonderful job representing residents, and especially helping them troubleshoot situations that come up in communities. And you've certainly taken a leadership role with this research. Speaking of the research, I'd now like to introduce everyone on the call to Roger Pallant. So Roger, prior to his retirement, was an avionics engineer with RAF for 22 years before moving into human resources and became a consultant in the disability sector. Roger himself is a retirement village resident and is a member of his residence committee where he's been for 4 years. Roger has been a member of the board of the RVRA for 3 years and currently holds the position of secretary. Now, Roger, in throwing to you, I'd just like to start with the very simple question: what's motivated the RVRA to conduct this research?
Thanks, James. For the sake of time, I'm going to get straight into this. When the grants came out, one of the target areas was improving and raising awareness of consumer resident protection. And that was to tackle a particular high-risk harm issue. And that fitted one of our key objectives, or the RVRA key objectives, of supporting RVRA members with issues of concern. And at this time, elder abuse in aged care was getting a lot of media attention. And we had, as Craig said, we'd been receiving an increasing number of calls from our members regarding elder abuse in their village. However, elder abuse is a broad topic and includes financial abuse, neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and psychological abuse. Too big an issue for us to take given we're all volunteers and we only had a shoestring budget. Recent studies in Australia found that psychological abuse was the highest reported form of abuse compared to all of the others. The New South Wales Abuse Toolkit, which I recommend you all have a look at because it's an excellent resource. It's very comprehensive and detailed in all forms of abuse and how to recognise signs and what strategies you may take in terms of mitigating them. So it defines psychological abuse as the infliction of mental stress, fear, or feelings of shame and powerlessness. It may be verbal or non-verbal and is usually a pattern of behaviour repeated over time and intended to control the person. Psychological abuse includes social isolation. The toolkit defines behaviours associated with psychological abuse as harassment, intimidation, threatening behaviour, patronisation, and verbal abuse. We decided that asking questions about psychological abuse was appropriate for the retirement village environment. We developed a survey and we wanted to find out if it was occurring and to what impact it was incurring. We were very successful to get we're very pleased to get the grant, and we're proud of this survey because it is the first to be conducted solely within retirement villages. And hopefully this will be the catalyst for some meaningful change across the retirement village sector. I look forward to sharing the findings from the report with you in a short while. Thanks, James.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. So just everyone knows Roger's done a fantastic job in pulling today together as the secretary, and he'll be joining us shortly to actually go through the findings of the report in a little bit more detail. I'd now like to welcome to the webinar Associate Professor Julie Pallant. Julie recently retired from Melbourne University, where she was the Director of Research and Graduate Studies. Previously, she worked as a Senior Lecturer in Applied Statistics at Swinburne University, teaching graduate subjects in survey design and data analysis. Julie has a PhD in psychology on the topics of stress, coping and wellbeing. She's worked as a counselling psychologist in a variety of educational government settings and was employed by Monash University as a lecturer on the graduate psychology program. Julie herself is retired and in a retirement village, so she can provide a wonderful perspective. So Julie, I'm just curious to say, can you talk to the effects of psychological abuse and provide those on the call with a bit of context of why this is such an important topic for us to be exploring today and through this research?
Thanks, James. Yeah, psychological abuse is a very serious issue because it can have very long-lasting consequences, particularly for the elderly who may be experiencing pre-existing health conditions. So the abuse can affect the person's thoughts, their emotions, their physical health, and also how they behave. In terms of its psychological effects, people can feel helpless, feel out of control, and that can result in very poor self-esteem. Those increased stress levels can dramatically increase the risk that the person develops severe anxiety and depression. It affects the person's ability to think clearly and to communicate. They may become confused, have difficulty concentrating, and you may notice that they have poor memory recall. The abuse can impact on their physical health. Symptoms such as headaches, changing in eating habits, tummy problems, high blood pressure are just some of the many physical symptoms. The ongoing stress can also worsen their health conditions. They may have chronic pain, heart, lung disease, cancer can also be impacted. Unfortunately, in terms of behaviour, abuse can also lead to the person withdrawing from social activities. This may be to avoid coming in contact with their abuser or to avoid situations where abuse may occur. Unfortunately, withdrawal can result in depression and poor mental health in the long term. So it's a very serious issue that we're addressing here. So thanks, James, for the opportunity to clarify that.
Thanks, Julie. I think that kind of puts into context really why we're talking about this subject matter of psychological level abuse. Yes, it's an alarming subject and somewhat confronting to talk about, but understanding the symptoms and what occurs in a person who's on the receiving end of this is important to be aware of so that we can, triage and keep our eye out as managers which is really pleasing to see. We've got so many of you on the call here today. I'd now like to invite Roger to return and join us. And Roger's going to take us now through a summary of the report that they've prepared. And for everyone's information on the call, the report is actually available on the RVRA website, as well as a few other pieces of information that I'm sure Roger will talk to. Following his presentation, as I said, we will move to a Q&A. And again, just to remind everyone, the Q&A function is available at the bottom of your screen in the webinar. You are more than welcome to open it at any point in time as Roger goes through the results and ask questions. I will be monitoring them in the lead up to the panel. So Roger, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, James. Buckle up your seatbelts and hope you're happy with the ride. Let's go. It's not working. Technology. Here we go. Let me come back. So the journey so far. This is the biggest project the RVRA has undertaken to date, and definitely the most important. We were not aware when we started this project how big and how complicated and how complex it was going to be becoming. I led the team, and as the RVRA board member responsible for the project, I've found this task seriously difficult at times due to the disturbing reports related to abuse. When we floated the survey, I was the only one who had access to the responses for about 4 weeks. They came in as 1, and there's 50, there's 100, and suddenly we had over 1,200 responses. And some of the comments from people were so disturbing that it really got to me. I felt their pain, I felt their anger, I felt their frustration, and it really got to me. But the focus was we really needed to look at this report and see what the positive outcomes would come from that. So the report's not about blame or finger pointing. Typo there. It tells a story that needs to be listened to and actioned. And we're feeling compelled and obligated to do something with this information, with a goal to mitigating this serious issue within our villages, and we will. This is a comment that came from somebody which I think sums up the whole issue. We are all doing the best we can to cope with life as an elderly person, and certainly don't need to be spoken to as if we are a child. Please, everyone, a little kindness and respect helps from all our society. Life can be lonely, frightening, and very confusing at times. We have lost so much of our independence and control. We just want to feel we are still real. And I think if you take away any message from today, take away this one, and remember that everybody that you are dealing with is a person. 1,259 people responded, which we felt was excellent, and females made up 61% of the sample. And the majority of the sample fell in the age brackets from 70 to 84 years of age. Just over 1/2 of the sample were living with someone, 55%. And that means that 45% of people are living on their own. Most are living in a retirement village for at least 10 years. However, we've got to be careful that we're not showing the negative side of retirement villages. We have to be conscious that and have a balanced view. So here are some of the comments that were really positive. And I'm fine and I love living where I am. I've met some lovely people and I have wonderful friends who live either side of me. Everyone respects each other's rights to live to privacy in this village. Everyone in the village I live in treats every other resident with respect and courtesy. I've always felt safe and well cared for in this village, and I've always been treated with courtesy and respect. Staff and fellow residents are extremely friendly, helpful, and always willing to be there for each other. So from this point on, we're going to talk about the 40% of people that actually reported abuse. The proportion of females reporting abuse was higher, 44%, than for males, 34%. The percentage of the younger age group, that's under 80 in the sample, reported abuse was much higher, 48% for the under 80s, compared with the older groups over 80s, 28%. The most common source reported for all types of abuse, except being patronised, was fellow residents, with over 70% of responding indicating residents of the source. That's a really interesting fact and statistic, and it's one we need to really work hard on and trying to mitigate that abuse for those people. For those respondents who indicated they'd been patronised, however, 69% specified management as the source of that type of abuse. This management included village staff, the manager and head office. And here's a comment that was also in the report. An example of our operator attitude. A couple complained about excessive noise from the upstairs unit and was told, don't worry about it, you'll be deaf soon anyway. Well, I can hear a few little chuckles in the background there, and I probably had that same response, but we need to consider that here's an elderly couple, mid-80s, health issues, living in a unit, second floor, and the people above them are making noises all times of night, and their quality of life has been impacted. So whilst on the surface, this is a story that you might tell at a trivia night, it has really serious impact on those people. Residence committees, or someone within the residence committee were reported as a third highest source of abuse. And the RVRA get a lot of inquiries from our members regarding residence committees and residence committees abusing their power. Unfortunately, the RVRA, we all, I've just said that. I am mostly suffering anger and frustration at how the friendship and peace of our village has been shattered by this residence committee. We do a lot of work with residence committees, and we are, as I might have mentioned before, we are currently running a series of videos for residence committees and how they should operate. For each type of abuse, over 2/3 of respondents indicated it occurred on multiple occasions, with a highest percentage of 77% for harassment. Across all abuse categories, the most frequently reported place for the abuse to occur was in the social and common areas of the village. This is happy hour. This is where we go for coffee. This is where we play cards and mahjong and go to trivia nights and watch our band play. This is where most of the abuse is happening. Impact on the abuse, so you can see there that there's no effect, mild effect, and major effect. The no effect is in blue, and in the middle, the red mild effect is in the red. The major effect in the yellow. So the people had a major effect for the areas of harassment, being threatened, being intimidated, and being verbally abused, and for being patronised, it was around the same. Another comment, I was admitted to a mental health clinic to get some respite from the unhappiness within the village. This is a woman, 75 to 79, living on her own. Psychological symptoms experienced, the most commonly reported symptoms of abuse were depression, helplessness, isolation, fear, and anxiety. Respondents who were reported being threatened showed the highest level of symptoms. Feelings of isolation were reported by 31 of the respondents experienced intimidation, 29 for those that were harassed, 29% for those who were harassed, and 28% of those who were threatened or verbally abused. Low self-esteem was reported by a quarter of the respondents who had been threatened, verbally abused, or harassed. Another comment, I was surprised that it affected me so badly. I felt so ashamed, like a small child being told off at school. Action considered as a result of the abuse, a substantial proportion of respondents who experienced abuse had considered leaving their village. 57% of those who had been threatened considered leaving, followed closely by 47% of those who were intimidated, 46% of those who were verbally abused, and 44% of those who were reported being harassed. If you look at this graph on the right-hand side, you will see that the yellow is those people who considered moving out of the village for each of the areas of abuse. The red is the self-harm area, and the purple is people who considered causing harm to someone else. It's very concerning that 13 respondents, 10 females and 3 males, were so upset about the abuse that they experienced, they considered harming themselves. The majority of these people were under 80, and all of these respondents had experienced 4 or 5 types of abuse. I met one of these people about 2 months ago when I was at a village visit south of where I live in Ballina. And I was having dinner and we had a chance to be alone, and she confessed to me that she'd attempted suicide as a result of her belief that her manager was abusing her. So I spoke to her about it, and she provided me with some evidence, and her evidence is rock solid. She was right. The manager was going around things the wrong way. So we have taken on her case for her, and she's now got a happier result. And we get a few of those calls through the RVRA. Other findings. A common response to abuse was to withdraw from activities in the village. Don't go to happy hour. Don't go to the trivia nights. Don't go over and have coffee with people. For all types of abuse except intimidation, the most common response was that they did not seek help. They suffered in silence, and often that will compound the issue. For those respondents who indicated they had sought help within the village, the most commonly reported help sources were the manager and the other residents. So they're going to you guys for help. So it's really important that we are having this conversation with you today and you have an input into how we may be able to deal with these issues. Are residents aware of the village's elder abuse policy? We all know that the Retirement Villages regulation requires you to have one, but over 2/3 of the sample indicated they were not aware of the village's elder abuse policy. This does not mean it doesn't exist. This means they're not aware of it. So maybe you have an action to promote this, promulgate it, communicate it a little bit more. So my observations and advice, I know that managers, you've got a very difficult job, and when you're employed, you've given a bag of tricks. Now, these bag of tricks, they have a crystal ball so you can look into. They have a spare set of eyes that you stick on the back of your head, and you've got a little radar you can stick on the top of your head that is an early warning system for impending doom and gloom. Doesn't work that easily. My observation is the majority of managers are doing a great job. So keep it up. Sadly, this report shows that some are not doing a great job. And we will support our members and will take action on their behalf if we verify that that's true. And we don't act unless we verify that what is happening is true. I have called managers on behalf of the RVRA to get their side of a story. So there are some backstories here. This report has provided surface information. There's a lot of information behind this report that's not stated in the report. We are going to take those issues and the issues up with the Property Council, and we're going to have discussions with them about this. This issue will only get better if we work together. We're in a partnership here to make sure this works better. Standards are important. I love standards, but compliance is better. Words are great, action is better. So conclusion, we all have a role to play. Managers, residents, the RVRA, everybody has a role to play. We all need to consider our actions and words and the impact that they may have on somebody. We should help those who are not as good at helping themselves. Maybe we should look in the mirror and ask ourselves, am I the problem? I go back to the first comment from that lady saying, please everyone, a little kindness and respect helps from all our society. Just a few thanks. Thank you to all the residents who filled out the survey. Thank you to all of your key operators and all of you for attending this webinar. Diane, who is our Vice President, who worked with me on this job and kept me focused and sane, to our board for their input and support, to my expert gurus, Julie, who you've met, and Dr. Jason, and finally DCM and James for donating their time and expertise to organise and run this webinar. Thanks, James.
Thanks, Roger. And just while that's been going on, we've had a number of questions starting to come through. So please, I'd encourage you all, if you've got any questions, certainly as you're hearing the results of the research from village manager and operator perspective, to send through any questions that you've got. We're now going to move to the panel part of this webinar, and I'm going to invite Julie and Craig to rejoin us. And I'm also going to introduce everyone to Liz Johns, who's the Regional Operations Manager for Keaton, which until recently was Lend-Lease Retirement Living. Elizabeth has been with Keaton now for the past 7 years and has over 17 years experience in the retirement living industry, specifically management of villages, management of people, and stakeholder management. Elizabeth is currently responsible for 9 villages across New South Wales and the ACT, as well as the operational teams and the services they deliver to residents. So I'd like to thank Elizabeth for joining us, or Liz, as we will refer to her, as she said earlier. And I'd also like to welcome back Julie and Craig. To kick off the conversation, what I thought I'd do is I'd go back to Julie, who you spoke so well about some of the effects of psychological elder abuse. And I'm really curious now to put the research into some context. If residents were to approach a village manager regarding abuse, what should the managers do?
Hi, James. Well, thanks for the opportunity to just give a few tips and hints that might be useful. Because I take my hat off to managers. So I would say dealing with abuse is just one of the most difficult situations. Even for an experienced counsellor, it's a real challenge. So yeah, I feel for you. It's a very complex issue. We're dealing with two issues when we're dealing with someone who's experienced abuse. One is the abuse event itself, and what practical action that might be necessary or even possible. But the second one, and it's a really big one, is the emotional well-being of the resident. And that really needs to take priority because, as I said earlier, abuse has wide-ranging effects, okay? So we need to try and keep that in mind as we're dealing with the situation. Now, every situation is different, every resident, every episode of abuse. So you really do need some skills in your toolkit that you can pull out when necessary. You don't often get warning when something like this is going to come up. And your response as a manager, you're the person that so many people go to. And the way you respond and you behave towards a resident is a very, very serious impact on the way the event pans out for that person. The resident's going to be feeling very fragile. As we know, many people don't seek help. So the fact that they are seeking help, they've had to summon up their confidence to come forward. And they need to feel supported and heard. And if they're not, that can be the final straw. When they don't trust people because of the abuse, to have their manager who they do trust initially, not listen to them and to listen to them with respect and patience, then that can be a really big blow for them. So one of the key things is for the managers to keep their own emotions under control because they're humans. They're going to be picking up on the emotions of the person in front of them. So it's very important that you understand that the person in front of you may have difficulty communicating clearly. Their thoughts are all over the place. They may be stressed, anxious, they may be crying. And I know for some managers that's a difficult thing to handle. Having a box of tissues handy, just reaching across and putting it next to them just can be a little touch that the person feels like they're understood. They may be angry, they may be aggressive, because that's the way some people hide deeper emotions in terms of anxiety and depression. So don't always react to the person's emotions. See if you can respond. Just stop, step back, try not to take it personally, and just listen to what's going on. You might be able to sort of see through their initial behaviour. You sort of need to ride out that initial emotional reaction that people have. And as I said, they may be confused and find it difficult to communicate. So you do have to be patient and try and draw out some facts and details from them. Try not to downplay or trivialise their concern. For them, it's very important, even if you don't think so initially. It's important that they're heard. And by being heard and by being respected, they can sometimes bring it back down into perspective, which they may have lost. In that process, it's important not to appear patronising. And, that can happen even if you don't intend it. So just be aware that, patronisation is a form of abuse that people really do find difficult. As oldies, we experience it when we go out into the general community. We often get patronised. People who are hard of hearing are treated as if they're dumb. So just try to be aware of how your behaviour may come across, even if you're not intending it. When you're listening, try and not respond initially. As I said, try and take notes of the abuse episode because you will need that in future if this is ever investigated. So those records are important, but it also gives the person the message that they're being listened to, that you're writing it down, it's being taken seriously. And that respect is an important part of the process of helping them to calm down a little bit and to give the communication. Now, this is a difficult one. You do need to be aware of any red flags for that person's mental health. as we heard in the report, some people have attempted suicide because of the abuse they're experiencing. So when the person's in front of you, just watch out for anything that you feel might indicate that they're suicidal or that they might intend to lash out and harm somebody else. If you're concerned about that and you feel that that's what's happening, you have a duty of care to get that person some immediate support. Please do not let them leave your office if they're in that state. You need to talk to them about finding a friend, family member, or a support that they can have immediately. Is there someone in the village that they trust? Is there someone that can be with them during this process? So try and take that very seriously and have available resources at your fingertips that you can refer people to. You know, have the lifeline phone number, have organisations in your local area that the person may be able to get immediate help for. Put them onto things like the elder abuse hotline, the RVRA. If they're needing information, if you can be that source of that information, it can reduce your workload if you can refer them on to appropriate sources there. So preparation, I think, is an important thing. So having some form of mental health first aid training would be very useful here, because for most of us, you know, starting as managers, you may not have had to deal with these very vulnerable people and the mental health issues that come up. So the more training and information you have, the better equipped you will be to keep the situation under control and to respond appropriately. And we've certainly heard indications. And as I was analysing the data in the survey, you know, I was heartbroken at just some of the responses. People wrote whole essays and stories about how they went to the manager hoping for some help, but they left feeling totally disheartened. You know, they weren't listened to, wasn't taken seriously, and that can be the final straw. One thing I will suggest is when you do meet with someone with an episode of abuse, it's a good idea to follow up with an email that just shows the person that you've listened to them, that you report back to them and say, I understand this is what's happened. Can you just confirm that? But also in that email, you can be giving them any information like the phone numbers or contact details, because when the person's with you, they may not be able to think clearly. They may not hear your communication. They're just focusing on their emotions. And that email can then become a record if in the future you ever, you know, queried about your responses to the person, but it also reaches out to the person and says, I listened, I heard, and this is what's happening in response to that situation. Now, I just want to finish on one, what I think is a very equally important issue, and that is for each manager to take care of their own mental health, because I think it's one of the toughest jobs. Not only are they juggling the day-to-day pressures of running the village, but they're dealing with emotionally challenging situations, you know, almost on a daily basis in some cases. So watch out for something that's called empathy fatigue. And what that is for people working in service industries where they're exposed to people's emotions, they can become overwhelmed. They can start to feel numb and wanting to distance themselves from that experience. So watch out for that and burnout, and seek help. As we tell our residents, seek help when you need it. And I'd also apply that to our managers, because you often will need support to get through some of these situations. Thanks, James.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Julie. I think I was scribbling frantically as you were speaking then, so I'm really glad we're recording certainly this entire webinar, but that specific section, because I know we've had a few people write some questions through. Yes, we are recording today, and yes, we will be placing the recording of this webinar up online for future access. Now, Liz, I want to sort of turn the attention to yourself. You're responsible for a number of villages. You've got a number of village managers that report into you, and certainly going through the research, there can be some quite confronting statistics to look at, and certainly Julie raised some wonderful points around not just supporting residents, but getting support for yourself as well, for looking after your own mental well-being first. What are some of the things that you're hearing from your team on the ground around this space of psychological elder abuse? How are you supporting your team on the ground?
From our perspective, we're supporting our teams with, we actually do offer mental health training and also mental health first aid as well. What we encourage is that we actually have a mental health first aid trained team member on each site, so that we can, not only they can triage situations, but also they can help their team to actually manage those situations as well. So that gives it a little bit of meat around that. This particular research that's being done is so important, and we as operators absolutely want to work with the RVRA, DCMI, with how to actually resolve some of these issues. So what we're doing at the moment is we're hearing back that, you know, the teams are actually suffering some level of abuse themselves. However, what we're doing is, you know, it's about creating a whole community of kindness. So to your point, Julie, you know, it's about listening to someone that feels aggrieved. So when I say someone aggrieved, I'm talking about a resident. And you're quite right. We've actually implemented training over a 2 or 3 year period where we've actually coached our teams into actually sitting and listening rather than speaking. So listening to what that resident is concerned about. And you're quite right, is sometimes they need to get it off their chest. We don't need to interject. We need them to let them speak, and even take them away to a private area so they can sit down. And if they are upset, they can be upset because they need to get that off their chest. And the idea of that is that follow-up. We absolutely encourage our teams, and I think this is starting to move through the industry as well, is listen to that person, let them go home, and then we can actually call them the next morning or check in on them so that we can actually demonstrate that we did listen. It's a very, very important thing to do. And again, it sounds very simple, but it's about making it very human. It's, you know, touching that person's heart to say, yes, I did listen to you. You were very upset, but yesterday I just wanted to check in on you. So those sorts of things, it's bringing back that human element to our industry as well. That so while we're caring for our residents, etc., we're also doing we're closing the loop so that we're keeping an eye on each other as well. Something that we do is when we have a situation like that, particularly if we've got somebody that we're worried about, we ask our teams to escalate it. So generally there's a senior village manager or a regional manager that we need to let people know about what's actually happening on the site. Around that as well, when we look at the team, so there's also that psychological impact on the team that might be dealing with a resident that's particularly upset or frustrated. We're fortunate enough to have an injury management team, and they can report that into that particular person as well. They'll check in on the team member, but also they'll be asking about what's happening with the resident. Where are we at with that? That is very important, that we know what's going on there, to the point that if we're concerned about someone, we'll actually try and reach out to the resident again and maybe encourage them to seek professional help. And that also leads into our health and wellbeing strategy as well. So what we're trying to do is, what we're actually piloting at the moment, we currently have 6 health and wellbeing coordinators in our portfolio. And what we're actually doing is we have 7 at the moment. So this is nationally. There'll be 26 by the end of October across Australia. So that represents basically 1/3 of our portfolio. And the idea of that, it's not about, in the past is having a nurse on site, etc. It's actually about teaching people how to live life and connect in a social environment. So, it's a more of a holistic view, and it's creating social connections for people. It's also encouraging them to stay mobile and functioning as well. So that's where we're looking at living life as opposed to looking, band-aiding situations. It's encouraging people. So ultimately, it's looking at a whole healthier community. So it's a healthy place for our team to work in, but it's also a very healthy place for our residents to live in. So, and that goes to our point that we want to have a community of kindness, but also for people to thrive in, both our team and also our residents.
Yeah, great, Liz. I think that's really good. And we just had a question come through around some mental health first aid training, and that's certainly something the DCM Institute will be putting some messages out about shortly about how we can help you and your teams facilitate that training for your staff on the ground in the coming weeks. Now, while the focus is on you, Liz, I just want to address something very specific in the research was about the elder abuse policy. As we know, when the legislation changed some years ago, they said all operators need to have this, but it seems that 2/3 of residents aren't aware. And I think the way Roger phrased it is probably respectful. They aren't aware. It doesn't mean the policy doesn't exist. They're just not aware of its existence. So as an operator's point of view, how are you making sure that your residents are aware that you do actually have an elder abuse policy, so that should some of the things that we've discussed across this webinar today arise, your residents know that they have some place to turn on how to triage what they might be going through?
Look, absolutely. And I take that point honestly and openly, because we're dealing with paperwork all the time. We can always have it in the library, in a communal area. We can have it in a folder. But, if it's not talked about regularly in newsletters, etc., maybe we need to actually up the education within our properties, so that we make it easier for residents, so that they don't have to sit down and read an entire policy, but talk about it as part of our village manager or resort manager morning teas. Bring it up in newsletters, talk about it in the resident committee meetings. So it's actually a really part of our language. And I think the industry has to get across that too. It just becomes part of our language and our culture, because the only way forward from this research that's actually been done is to actually work together. And if this is what we think it can be, so it becomes part of an everyday conversation. We're not going to state elder abuse or this or that and meet every day, but what we would be talking about is if there are people that they're concerned about within their communities, how do we deal with that? Or how do we get people out and about, and so that they know that that's there. And to the point that it shouldn't always sit with the manager, it should actually be cascading down to the village administrator or the maintenance fellow as well. And so that it just becomes part of our language and our culture.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. And Craig, I'm really curious now from your perspective. Obviously, this research has been done, and we're going to go in a moment into the next steps. But before we do, I kind of want to build on some of the conversations we've been having. We're talking about resident-to-resident elder abuse, and yes, the research shows that there's some between manager and resident as well. I want to talk about specifically resident-to-resident. How involved should the village managers get in trying to intervene and mediate these situations? Is it the role of the village manager? Yes, I'm playing a bit of devil's advocate here, but I'm doing that to tease out your views as in your role with the RVRA.
I think it's very difficult for the village manager. I believe they need to get involved, because they're the ones who are under legislative obligation to provide a safe environment under Section 66. Under the Code of Conduct in New South Wales, they have to have an elder abuse policy. So they need to be involved, but they're very reluctant. When we get our calls, I think we get 2 to 3 calls a month on elder abuse, but we get quite a few more which touch on elder abuse and say, we went to see the manager, but the manager said it wasn't any of her business or his business. And I think that's a bit of a downfall, if you like. And quite frankly, the RVRA has the same issue when a member comes up against another member. How do we get involved in that? And I think it's a very tricky question, but the fact is you have to. The manager has an obligation to get involved. And if it's not to mediate itself, it's at least to advise, listen. And as Liz said, it's pretty much listening, letting the situation calm down, and then turning them towards a service provider if that is needed. But it's a very difficult trick to identify it, first of all, for a manager, and then be able to deal with it. It's not easy.
No, it's not. And I have to say, I've been absolutely overwhelmed with all the questions that are coming through on the chat. So thank you for everyone who's on this call for submitting them. It's very similar to experiences to what we had on Tuesday when we held this webinar for residents and their families in Retirement Village. And this webinar was actually broadcasting to a number of community centres, which was really pleasing to hear as well. Unfortunately, I think we're not going to get the time to address every single question, but we will close them out after the fact. So thank you for submitting them to us. And Craig, what I wanted to do with keeping the focus on you was really just say, you've collected all of this information, you've got this great research, you've got the support from government. There certainly seems like there's an appetite from the residents to continue to have a conversation. There's an appetite from operators. How are you going to use this research, and what are the next steps? And I know we've got a few slides for you to talk to as we say this. So as you start talking, we'll bring these up on screen for you.
Okay, thank you. I think basically when we look at the next steps, we've got to have a list of people that people can go to. We are not, the manager is not a service provider in terms of mental health. What you're looking at is a group of people who are in independent living, but they're getting older and older and older, and they're losing their independence. And that is a big loss. And that is a big mental health issue. And I think what you've got to be able to do, managers and RVRA itself, if we get calls, is be able to refer people to people. Well, first of all, give a sympathetic ear. That is the first step. It's usually the first step is just, they just want to be heard, as Liz has said. So listen to them. But then once you see the problem and how the problem is emerging, then you should be able to point to areas that service providers that can go to help. Like if it's legal, Seniors' Rights Service, Older Persons Advocacy Network, Legal Aid, Lifeline Australia, the Elder Abuse Hotline. So there are a lot of services out there to help people who are coping with abuse of one sort or another, and particularly psychological abuse. And they're trained to do it. We're not. I think in terms of where we go next, I think the issue is basically, I think we have to develop strategies together. We have to work together to I guess, be better at identifying abuse. The issue that the manager's getting is usually getting one side of the story. The issue that RVRA is getting is one side of the story. And getting the two sides of the story to come together is an issue. And I think that's why we have to work together to develop strategies to work together in terms of resident versus resident, and honestly, particularly resident committees, because there is an increasing tendency for resident committees to be actually abusing members or other members of the committee. And the RVRA is working on policies or a template for a code of conduct for resident committees at the moment. But I think that's the way we have to do, is work together to make sure that all the sector stakeholders can see what is abuse, identify it, and be able to mitigate it to a certain extent. But quite frankly, I think this is all well and good to try and mitigate it, to be nice and discuss and try and get people to see reason and refer to outside. You're not going to change some people, unfortunately. And this is a very personal opinion, but I really think we need to improve the enforcement of legislation. That you cannot allow a willing troublemaker to stay in a village. There has to be some ability to sanction their activity. And honestly, you've got sanction possibility under the Act, but it's impossible to actually go to NCAT and things like that. So I think you have to make it clear in your contracts, you have to make it clear in the legislation that there are penalties as well. That's a purely personal view, not the RVRA view. So I just want to throw that out there. But really what we want to do is basically get together with the Department of Fair Trading, with the operator peak bodies, and work out a strategy, that coordinated strategy that addresses the issue and looks at solutions or pathways. Thank you. Just to mention, there's a slide up now about the Retirement Village Residents Association. There's the contact numbers. By all means, please contact us if you want more information about what we're doing or what we're trying to do. Quite frankly, I myself have participated in and will be participating in another one at least, joint trips to villages with the operator and manager to resolve issues between various warring parties in residents, between residents, and also warring parties between the residents committee and residents, leaving aside the manager versus resident. I mean, it is a joint, I'm hoping it is a joint approach.
Thank you, Craig. And I think just the overall work of the Retirement Village Residents Association in New South Wales in not just conceiving doing this research, but actually making it happen and happen quickly is a real credit to yourself and Roger and Diane, who's not with us, as well as the rest of the RVRA board. Certainly when you spoke about this 6 months ago, to be able to go to field, do the research and be able to talk about the results is a wonderful achievement. We're now at the sort of the conclusion of the webinar. So I just wanted to circle back around with a few points for the people that are on the call around the country, having seen some of the names. We have been recording this webinar and we will be arranging for it to go up online. An email will come out after the fact, letting everyone know where they can find the recording. The research itself is available on the RVRA's website, as well as some fact sheets that can be placed in and around the community centre, should you so choose as an operator or manager of Retirement Village. As I mentioned before, the DCM Institute is very keen to continue to talk about mental health first aid within the subject area of seniors, and we'll be putting out some information about that for our participants and other organisations who'd be interested in getting their staff trained in this area. I think the operators need to be supported and thanked for their time today. I know it's an hour out of your day and a number of you have set aside this time to be part on this call, and we do thank you for it. I'd like to specifically thank the speakers on today's call, Julie, Liz, Craig and Roger. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on this call, and I say I really feel privileged that Roger and Craig, you invited me to moderate today. It's been really thrilling working with you all on this and exploring this, sometimes difficult subject matter. And Roger, I do want to pay a tribute to yourself. I know how personally you took some of the comments that came through, having seen them myself. You were generous enough to share them, and some of it was quite confronting. I think the real pleasing thing from my perspective, having been in the sector a long time, is there's clearly an appetite to continue to have a conversation around the subject matter of psychological elder abuse. And I think we need to have more days like today. We need to have days like today where the Residents Association are talking with operators and managers, and that we are involving government as well. I think there's a real appetite to collectively address these sorts of problems rather than to let them get out of control and then it comes in from a legislative point of view. So again, Craig, Roger, thank you for your leadership in this space, and please pass my thanks on to Diane. That wraps up today's webinar. Once again, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for attending. It's been quite an insightful conversation around psychological elder abuse. And please stay tuned, as we will email you all where you can find the links to the webinar, the links to the report, and the links to further information. We look forward to seeing you soon, and thank you again for your day, and thank you to our speakers. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.